Hey, I'm Sam, and it's early Sunday morning in the forest again. There's still some mist in the trees. I thought I'd come back here because the weather's different and it's such a beautiful morning. I was hoping there'd be more mist because there's a thick mist hanging over the loch in the village. You can see why I love this place though. It's so magical. So I'm going to keep walking though this morning. Yeah, I can't remember whether I said this in the last video, but actually let's stay here with the sun behind. I can't remember whether I said this in the last video, but you know, when I say you, I mean me, I mean we. You know, I'm talking to myself as much as I am talking to you. I'm working this out as I go. And each footstep on the path, each video, is a kind of exorcism in a way. But it's a slow process, you know, it's a slow process. There are miraculous leaps and bounds in understanding and clarity and healing, but it's a slow process. So I always feel shame after I publish a video. I always feel shame. And I always feel vulnerable. But invariably, every single time, I see something new. I understand something I didn't understand before. And that's liberating, because understanding is liberating. Demystifying the things that we live with, the things we do, the feelings we have. You know, that is so important. Otherwise we're just controlled by these forces we don't even understand. These forces that drive us to do things and say things that we then hate ourselves for. So we need to understand. We need to understand. So something that became very, very clear to me after the last video is there's something that became very clear to me after the last video, was about change. The change feels impossible. Let's get away from the river, actually, it's a bit noisy. Change feels impossible. You know, truthfully, when I look back, you know, with the clarity I have now, I can see the same patterns that I had at 5 years old, 4 years old. My first memories, standing in isolation and feeling terrified and pretending, developing a compensating personality to cope with the feelings of shame and fear. I was doing that from my earliest memories. I remember it. I remember it at play school, kindergarten. I remember it playing in the lane at the back of the house where I grew up. And I remember being scared. I remember being exaggerated to compensate for that fear. And all that did was make me feel more isolated, and it was a coping mechanism. And that's what I did my whole life. And I see it. So change is incredibly difficult. That's over 5 decades. of repeating the same patterns, and them just getting more and more complex, more and more distorted. So change when identity is formed, and maybe everybody's identity forms as a refuge, because we all need to feel a sense of stability. We all need to feel that we know, because life is a mystery. And so if we say, I know this about myself, I know this about myself, I know who I am, I know what the world is, I know the story of me that I keep telling myself over and over again, I know my opinions, I know why I have them, I know what I want, I know why I want it. Do we? Do we? So I think everybody's identity is a kind of refuge. But if you were born into hostility in whatever form, broken relationships, then, the safety of dwelling inside is vital. So we're very, very conscious of what's outside and what's inside. And inside is where we live. But inside, in this abstraction, it's distorted because we don't see objectively. We don't see clearly because we're patterned by fear. And so though we think we know what the world is and we see ourselves clearly and we see the world, it's distorted. We see through the lens of that distortion, the fear, and we have a bias. We have a bias in how we see ourselves and how we see others. And the reason these videos have been such a painful process, and the reason that they've been so helpful, is because we reveal ourselves in the language we use. So in my early videos for the first year or two, and still now, I see my bias, I see my stories, I see my illusions. But we hunger, we long, we need truth. We need more. And when we're locked in our certainty, in our identity, in its ways and means and methods, we're so limited, we're so confined, because the purpose of an identity formed in trauma is safety and stability. Change is almost impossible. So when we need more, when we hunger for more, we meet our resistance over and over again, because outside self, outside those ways and methods and mechanisms, outside is fear. Existential terror. So when we try and change, we face that terror. I cannot do different. I don't know how to do it different. You meet your inability to just do something different over and over and over again, and the pain increases. I broke over the years. I just got to a point where the ways that I was using didn't work anymore. For the life I longed for, I realised that I was never going to be able to achieve in the way I was going about it, because I was so limited, and my methods were developed for stability, not change. And no matter how much I tried to change, no matter how much I tried to do different, I couldn't. And I broke, completely broke. And then I had to learn how to be a different way. One of the things that caused me the most distress was I had no sense of self other than pain. I became someone different for each situation. And the company I kept. I became who they needed to be, who I needed to be validated and accepted and seen. And I hated myself for that. I despised myself for that. I felt bereft, like desolate inside, because I didn't know who I was, because I was just pretending to be someone different each time. But over time, after I broke and those performances just didn't work anymore and my ways and methods just didn't work anymore, I broke and I had nothing. It felt like I had nothing. And all I felt inside was nothing. It was emptiness. And it was terrifying. It was terrifying because the abstraction of mind, with its distortion and biases, thinks it needs to tell another story. Thinks it needs to make up some noise again. I know, I need a story. I need to do something. I need to fill this peace, this unknown peace inside with more noise, more ways, more performances. But every time you do that, every time I did that, it just felt wrong. It felt painful. And so I sat with that space inside, that unfamiliar silence, and just let it be. And eventually you realise over time, so it's been 2 or 3 years, that from that place of silence, that's where you will find who you really are. You don't know who you are. You know who you've been, and you know what you're doing now to make sense of yourself. But in that silence is not nothing. That silence is the presence of everything. That's where it lives. So without the noise of your own abstraction and descriptions and explanations and grasping need to tell your story, to define yourself and define the world just to make it small enough to be not terrified, in that silence is where you live, is where the presence of you and everything lives. And that's why I said in the last video, it's almost like you become the moment. You become the moment. Doesn't mean those habits and patterns and ways and fears and the history, it's all still there. And we revert back to it very easily because it's familiar. But eventually you realise that you can't change yourself in the way that you think you can. Change for anyone is extremely difficult because we become who we become because that's who we need to be. And if there's still a need for us to be that way, you're not going to change. So you have to reconceptualize the essence, how you understand yourself. What are you? What are you? You are a discovery. And you don't change yourself. You get comfortable with stepping into the unknown and feeling that vulnerability of actually showing yourself, actually allowing yourself to drop your guard and be found, be reached by other people, by the world, by every single moment. You let the world in. You let the world in. And when you let the world in, when you allow yourself to step into vulnerability, you step into the unknown. You break the pattern that has bound you in self-protection, in your hiding place for all of your life. You step out of the shadow of your hiding place and into the light. And when you do that, the world changes you. You are changed. You don't change yourself. You are changed. As the world discovers you and draws you into new experiences, you are changed by those experiences. So when we try and change ourselves, why are we doing that? Why are we doing that? We're doing it because we don't accept ourselves. saying, I am wrong, I need to be different. Maybe you do, but it's in a very subtle way. You can't reject yourself, you have to accept yourself and then allow yourself to be seen. And then be transformed through the unfolding journey of your life. You don't know who you are. You don't know who you're going to be. You know who you've been. But there is an unavoidable vulnerability. There's an unavoidable vulnerability in allowing yourself to be found. Because we have an expectation, because we have a bias. We have an expectation of hostility and rejection. You know, the paradox of this is that in the microcosm of a broken beginning to life, with broken relationships and abuse, neglect, all that stuff, it's kind of a microcosm of the worst of the world. And that stuff does exist. You know, this place can be horrifying. The things that people do to each other, it's just horrifying. But we've already lived with that horror. And we've replayed it. We've lived with that horror. So what prevents most people from actually showing up deeply, broadening their bandwidth of presence in the world and experiencing intimacy is because they don't want to see that horror. They pretend it's not there. You already know it's there. And because you know it's there and you've already lived with it, you can also live with the beauty and the mystery. Most people miss that because their bandwidth is reduced because they don't want to see the horror. So you have survived. You have survived. I've survived. I've survived horror. Absolute horror. The worst of it at my own hand. Repeating abuse. Inviting abuse. But the world is also a beautiful place. A place of magic and mystery, and it wants you here. It wants you here. We don't get very long. Don't waste any more time. Don't waste any more time. Be with yourself. Be with yourself. Stop trying to fix yourself. Be with yourself. And in being with yourself, get comfortable with being with others. Get comfortable with letting people know you. Get comfortable with vulnerability and allow the world to find you. Allow yourself to be changed. And eventually, there's no resistance. You don't need to hold on. You don't need to refuse. You can allow yourself to be drawn into your own disappearance. What disappears? Attachment. Drawn into relationship, drawn into the mystery. And it's addictive. You have to stop being cruel to yourself. Stop being cruel to yourself. The greatest kindness you can do is just accept. It's a process. These things aren't events. They take time. So since I had a breakdown, it's, about 3 years, I think. And it took a lifetime to get to that point where I broke. And I still struggle. I still struggle with a lot. I still struggle with a lot. But we have to change the context within which we live to invite change and invite growth. So I need this. I need this. I need this. So radical change is often required. Change of location, change of job, change of friendship circles. Stop doing the shit that you keep doing that binds you in the moment. So do you want it? Do you want change? Do you want to heal? Do you want to liberate yourself? Stop putting barriers up. All the barriers we put up are exactly that. The barriers we put up. There is always choice. Always choice. Those choices can be terrifying and seem impossible, but there is always choice. And like I said a couple of videos ago, choice, the ability to choose, is your superpower. It's astonishing that you can actually make a choice and change something. You can step into the unknown. I think I said this before, you have perfect ability to make a choice. You have imperfect knowledge because you don't know what's going to happen. You're going to make mistakes. That's the adventure. The undiscovered unknown. In you and in the world. Make a choice. Small choice. Okay. I think I said everything I wanted to say. Look at the sunlight coming through the trees. So, thank you for being here. Thank you to everybody that supports me. The comments under the last video were inspiring, to say the least, and they were longer than usual, I noticed. And you know, those comments from all you lovely people that support me and tell me this means something, you know, you give me courage to continue, because this isn't easy. So you, me, we're healing. We're becoming real, becoming present, allowing the world to find us. So get involved. Get involved. So, thank you for being here. Thank you to everyone that supports me and donates. And I think that's it. I'll see you soon. Bye.